Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another of our Get Outdoors PA webinars, expanding your reach and offering inclusive and adaptive outdoor recreation programs. My name is Samantha Holbert, and I'm a consultant for the Pennsylvania Recreation and Park Society, who was hired to work on the development and implementation of the Get Outdoors PA program. With me on the webinar is one of our team members, Emily Gates of the Pennsylvania Recreation Park Society. And we have three presenters today. Our fourth one was unable to be with us. But the first presenter is Patricia Kleebman, who is a senior instructor of the Recreation, Park, and Tourism Management Department at Penn State University. And she's also an inclusive customer service consultant. We also have Emily Bortz, who is a regional outdoor recreation coordinator for the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, more specifically the Bureau of State Parks. And we also have Larry Joya, who is the founder of the Pittsburgh Adaptive Sports Network, as well as Dynamic Paddlers. The other person who was supposed to be on the call but was unable to is Bill Metzger, and he is a recreational hand cyclist. So we have a little bit of his input from our practice run this morning, but he had a health complication come up that he's unable to make it this afternoon. On your screen you'll see that we're presenting, we have a PowerPoint presentation that you can watch and keep you awake while the presenters are discussing their information. You can ask questions using the chat function in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. I mentioned that before if you want to let us know that you are would be interested in being a presenter. You can ask questions either throughout the session, and we'll try to answer them as you go along, or else we'll answer them at the end of the session. The webinar is intended for current partners of Get Outdoors PA, or partners who are still on the fence, or possibly partners to be. The goals for this particular webinar are to discuss creating outdoor recreational programming for all audiences in an inclusive manner by featuring adaptive recreation professionals and practitioners, to provide guidance on connecting with your audience and evaluating the needs, and getting started with adaptive recreation strategies for success, and connecting with partners to provide services. Now we have three different presenters from three different aspects of recreation. And we just wanted to give you a taste of all of these different kind of philosophies and practices, and they'll all give you what they know and what they have practiced. And then at the end of the webinar, we're going to ask you if you are interested in having more detailed information, or a follow-up webinar with more specifics. So we'll start off with Patricia Kleebman, and she's going to be talking about inclusive recreation and customer service. So Patricia, you're up.
Thank you, Samantha, for inviting me to be a part of this learning opportunity. As a certified therapeutic recreation specialist, I always jump at the chance to be a part of any inclusive recreation training. In the 30 or so years that I've been working in the field of recreation for people with disabilities, our views of how and where we serve people with disabilities and recreation have evolved so much that it's really exciting to watch, but we certainly have a ways to go. We started with segregated programs, as most of us remember, and then we moved to integrated programs, and now we're seeing highly focused, specialized programs that are specific to disabilities. And so our neighbors and our friends and our community members with disabilities, their options continue to improve, and that's a good thing. But we still have a way to go. Today I'm going to start with the concept of what we call person first. And we've learned over the years that we know that people without disabilities benefit from recreation, and particularly recreation in the outdoors. But we know that people with disabilities do as well. We just haven't been as good at it as we have in the past. My background and focus in inclusive recreation and inclusion training is to help people understand that the inclusion of people with disabilities in our programs is not only legally mandated, it's really both a social and a moral imperative as well. Of the many myths about disabilities and inclusion of people with disabilities, high on that list is that people with illness or injury or impairment are somehow different than the rest of us. We focus on their differences. But by adopting a person-first attitude about people with disabilities, we begin to change not only our attitudes, but how we program and include people with disabilities in our programs and services. Not only is it a moral and social imperative, but inclusion of people with disabilities is a smart financial decision as well, particularly for recreation programs that are funded through fees for service. 1 in 5 people between the ages of 16 and 64 has a disabling condition that interferes with an aspect of their daily life. Most of us can't afford to turn away 20% of our potential customers. By focusing on the person first, we can begin to eliminate the barriers to participation that people with disabilities face in their day-to-day lives, but particularly in recreation and leisure. Sorry, I'm catching up on my, okay, here we go. The first step in changing our attitudes about people with disabilities is to change our language about people with illness, injury, or impairment. Just as most of us have learned that the word retarded to describe someone with an intellectual or developmental impairment is offensive, there are other terms and phrases that are equally as disrespectful. Even terms that some people have considered to be progressive, such as special or exceptional, tend to separate people with disabilities from the rest of the population. The preferred terminology and attitude is really person first. So, for example, instead of saying and thinking about your new registrant for your program and saying we have a new person coming in who's autistic, it's more positive to describe your new guest as an 8-year-old girl who's excited to be with her friends and enjoy the outdoor experience and who has some social limitations. The autistic child becomes a customer with symptoms on the autism spectrum. The amputee is not the amputee, but is an adult with an amputation. The quadriplegic is no longer a quadriplegic. That person becomes a person first, with a spinal cord injury who uses a wheelchair. The emphasis is on the person first. Just as we have learned in other areas of our lives that words matter and show and really represent our attitudes, when we're working with people with disabilities, we see the same thing. A colleague and I developed a customer service approach to inclusive programming that we have called the WAMR model. And we've been excited about this because we've had the opportunity to do this training within the state park system, at PRPS, and in a variety of other situations, both community, commercial, and in the military. And it is really an approach to customer service inclusion that is directed toward general recreation providers, not clinicians. In the old days, if you were going to work with people with disabilities, you went into therapeutic recreation. But now we know, of course, that people with disabilities are out and about and in the community and using our services. Unfortunately, when we look at the Department of Justice and complaints about the Americans with Disabilities Act, we see that on the top of the list, people complain because there are architectural barriers that prevent them from getting into buildings or accessing facilities. Importantly, though, is on a second on that list is that someone, a customer, a service representative, an employee, an agent of the agency was disrespectful, unaware of the rights of people with disabilities, or was resistant to inclusion. Buildings are a little harder to change and a little bit more expensive, but when we're talking about inclusive customer service, what we're talking about is changing attitudes and perceptions which help us then be inclusive. The WAMR approach is a 6-step sequenced approach to customer service that really it has embedded in it concepts of inclusion. So the first step we talk about is welcoming people. How do we let folks know that our programs and services are open to everybody and of all abilities? We look at our signage, we look at our marketing materials, we look at who is the first person at the visitor center or at the front desk to greet a customer when they come in. What is the message that they're sending? What does your website say? How are people greeted and visited when they come to your facility? We know that only 12% of people with disabilities use wheelchairs. So many of our customers with disabilities have disabilities that are invisible. We may not know that they have an issue or require an accommodation. Great customer service suggests that we address all people who enter our programs and services as if they are in need of accommodations. It's very similar to how we design buildings now. I call it the Walmart door syndrome. Technically, and in therapeutic recreation terms and in disability terms, it's called universal design. And essentially, nobody in today's culture would design a building that is not accessible. When you walk into Walmart right now, the door opens by that automatic eye and people have access to that facility. And that is a feature that is designed for people with disabilities, but it helps all of us. So when we welcome folks and we treat them with respect and we ask, how can we help you get the most out of this experience? And we ask that of everybody. We're not segregating people with disabilities, and we're providing great service. So welcome is the first step of the WAMR approach to customer service. The next step is ask. Our greatest resource in including people with disabilities are those folks who live and face the challenges of today's culture with a disability. Unfortunately, we've all been taught as children not to look at a disability, not to talk about a disability, don't stare. But what that does is it prevents us from an opportunity. If I imply universal design features, for example, I ask everybody, how can I help you get the most out of this experience? I've just given great customer service if the person doesn't need an accommodation. If they do need an accommodation, I've just now opened the door for a great discussion. And again, they're the experts. Before we start talking about modification and special equipment, what we want to talk about is how can we help you individually. Not everybody experiences disability in the same way. Not everybody experiences the same disability in the same way. So asking and talking about how we can help you get the most out of your experience is a great way to get that conversation going. The third step, or the third sequence in our WAMR model is modification. And again, we're going to go right back to the person who's approached us, who wants to join our program, and we're going to say, what can we do? Oftentimes, they'll be the person who will tell us, I just need you to do this, or I just need this little bit of modification. Other times it might be really highly specialized equipment, but we won't know until we talk with that person. What this does also, by the way, is sort of alleviate some of the fear I think that people have about working with people with disabilities. Even as a certified therapeutic rec specialist, I don't know everything. I don't know how to make every single modification. I don't know how to make every single adaptation. There's so much new equipment on the market. I am not caught up with everything. But the person who's living with a disability may be, and so that will be where we start our modifications. We're going to hear a lot more about specific modifications later on this hour, and certainly when we do trainings on the WAMR model, we talk about categories of modifications and ways that you can change your activity. But the bottom line is, and it's important to remember, ask your expert who is standing right there. The third step in the WAMR model is what we call the monitor step. And I would parallel this to an experience that you have at your favorite restaurant. Most of us, when we go to a restaurant, we enjoy the great customer service. The waitress comes back and touches base and makes sure we have enough to drink and we have bread, and is there anything else that she or he can do to help us get the experience. With inclusion, very many times people say, okay, I've opened the program, I've provided the marketing, they're here now, my job is done. And as we know, that's not the case with any good customer service. We need to be making sure that we're touching base, talking with our folks, hey, how's it working? Can we maybe not do as much modification as we did last week? How are we progressing in the process? And we're really just continuing to give that great customer service so that our participants are enjoying and getting the same experience that people without disabilities are afforded as well. The evaluation stage, most of us are doing great evaluation either informally or formally through surveys and follow-ups and web contracts and SurveyMonkey. But do we ask about how were the accommodations, and did we provide great customer service, and is there a way that we could have done a better job? We talk about it a lot here at the university. How do we follow up and look at our programs and say we could improve and make it better this time? If you have a customer service survey that goes out, make sure that you include some questions on it, or ask people about, hey, I noticed that we did some modification on an activity for you. How did it work? What could we have done better next time? Finally, our last stage in the WAMR model is what we call the referral stage. And it's important to remember that not all people can participate in all programs. In other words, sometimes our programs, our budgets, our reasonable accommodations, concerns about safety mean that some folks may not be able to participate in every program. When we talk about referral, though, we're not talking about kicking somebody out of the program or refusing to let them participate. What we're saying is, for this particular program and these particular parameters, we don't feel like you can get the most experience. And that's when the partnership that we're going to talk about later on this hour really becomes so important. We're not just slamming the door in somebody's face and saying, we're not doing that here. What we're doing is going through 6 steps, saying we tried, it didn't work, and now let's partner with an agency that can provide you with some great experience. And that leads me on to our next presenter.
Well, thank you so much, Patty. That was terrific. Lots of good information. And please remember that if you have questions, you can chat them. And the next person is Emily Bortz, and she's going to talk kind of from the state park perspective.
Yes, thanks, Samantha. I'm very glad to be a part of this webinar as well, and I'm happy that you all are able to be here too. When we think about where to start in making our programs inclusive, I'm going to talk a little bit about where I started with that. And it all started back in October of 2011 when I went to a 2-day training on inclusive recreation. This training was given by Patricia Kleben, who you just heard, and her consulting group. It was a great first step in sort of understanding where we are and where we need to be as an organization when we're doing inclusive and adaptive programs. Once I got to that point, it was sort of a no-brainer for us to go in the route of kayaking. Our kayaking programs are our most popular programs. I always joke around that we could fill a kayak program every day, all day. And I also, once I researched it a little bit more, saw that a lot of the trainings that were being offered in adaptive recreation were actually in adaptive paddling. A lot of equipment that was out there was adaptive paddling equipment, and so that was the route we took. Beyond that 2-day training with Patty, I did a 1-day body mechanics training, and then I also was able to attend the American Canoe Association's adaptive paddling workshop. And this was a 4-day, really intensive training specifically on adaptive paddling, where I learned a lot of great information, skills, tips, tricks, techniques. Once that was over, I came back to my park and I started offering a similar training, sort of incorporating all of those things that I learned along the way and teaching our staff those skills and that knowledge that I learned. And I'm going to make a little plug here. Larry may mention it later as well, but coming up in June, the 25th through the 28th, if you are interested, the American Canoe Association is going to be offering another adaptive paddling workshop in Pittsburgh. So keep that on your calendar if that's something you're interested in. So beyond the training, then we went to needing some equipment. And a lot of our equipment came from Chosen Valley Creating Ability. You'll see later on there's a link to their website. They have a lot of wonderful adaptive paddling equipment for sale. And it's very, very much universal design and very adjustable, which is kind of a nice thing to have. And so since then, that's been about 3.5 years, we've just built on that program. You know, as I do programs and work with different folks, I kind of see different equipment, and we've been building from there. And, you know, from that, we hope to, you know, sort of move on to another sort of recreation aspect that, you know, maybe be bicycling or archery or something like that. But it's definitely a slow process. Next, I sort of want to talk about staffing, equipment, and marketing. So I think the first thing that you want to think about is getting as many of your staff and interns and volunteers on board with this idea of adaptive and inclusive programming and get them trained. You need to make inclusion a priority, not just an afterthought. You need to keep it at the forefront of your mind during trainings and equipment purchases and grant writing and all of that stuff when you're thinking about funding these types of things. You also want to think about how many staff you might need for a specific activity, and it definitely depends on the activity. Obviously, the greater chance of injury, such as in kayaking, you want a greater number of staff. Pennsylvania State Parks, our best practices say that, you know, you should have about 1 staff per 10 paddlers. The American Canoe Association drops that in half. They say it should be about a 1-to-5 ratio. So if you're thinking about having an inclusive program, you know, you definitely want your staff complement to go up a little bit, but you don't want it to be overkill either. You also want to have the equipment set up and readily available for your staff. Here in state parks, we have a sort of a central location in our region for our adaptive equipment, and our staff is able to go on a calendar and reserve that equipment if they need it. And then also some of our larger parks who get additional attendance at their programs, they've started to build their own sort of fleet of equipment as well. And then going back to what Patty mentioned is that universal design. You know, you don't necessarily always need super expensive equipment. We've found that simple things that maybe are good in our everyday roles and everyday programs, such as like trekking poles. Trekking poles are good for a lot of people when they're out hiking. You can use your arms to propel you forward. It helps with less impact on your legs, and it also increases your balance and your traction. So that could also help with people with various ability levels as well. We've also found paddle grips, the kayak paddle grips, to be excellent resources. They're super inexpensive. You know, for people paddling, it's just easy to put those paddle grips on your paddle and go, and it helps sort of alleviate the pressure on your hands where your hands are touching the paddle. But we've also found that paddle grips can be really great for people with visual impairments because it helps them know where to place their hand on the paddle. We also do advertising for our programs that are inclusive. So you want to sort of think along those lines as well. So include some sort of statement that, you know, this program is for people of all ability levels or something like that. And then we here at State Parks have certain phrases that we include on our publications and brochures. And we've worked with our legal department on these phrases. And then I also wanted to mention that during those trainings that I've been to, I was told that there are 2 obstacles to participation. And that would be, one of them is lack of information, and the other is lack of opportunity. So if your organization is providing an opportunity, you need to make sure that your potential visitors have the information they need in order to know that that is available to them. For us, we made up a flyer, and just a sort of general flyer advertising our adaptive paddling programs. And I hand that out at festivals, and we put it in our park kiosks and in our offices and things like that to get the word out. So we've had some hands-on experience in that 3.5 years. It's definitely sort of learn by doing, and you'll learn more and more as you go and as you start to put that knowledge and skills to practice. We've noticed that, you know, a lot of people, everybody learns in a different way, and they have various learning styles. So you kind of want to teach to those various learning styles. You also want to think about involving people's senses. They're more likely to learn and remember what you're teaching them if you've involved their senses. And this is especially vital to people, your participants who may have a visual impairment. You want to include those senses, those other senses, to help them understand and learn what you're trying to get across to them. So as you guys can see, much of my experience is with adaptive inclusive kayaking programs. And so I've listed up here to know and use the universal signals for stop, emergency, and I'm okay. And there's also universal signals for things like cycling, when you're turning or when you're stopping. So depending on the activity that you're going to be making inclusive or adaptive, you want to kind of learn those signals. You want to make sure you're using them, your staff is using them, and then you want to teach those to your participants and make sure they know how to use them as well so that you can communicate effectively. You also want to be aware that some medications can cause sun sensitivity, they can cause dehydration, or even decrease people's ability to regulate their body temperature. And this again kind of goes back to that good customer service. If you're building into your programs breaks for a snack or a water drink, or just a general break where they can kind of stretch and move around, you're making that, helping them get through that and making for a good customer service. I also, as an instructor, tend to bring extra gear with me and also be willing to give up any gear that I may have. So, hat, sunscreen, towel, extra water, extra snacks, maybe a fleece if it's going to be chilly, or a rain jacket or something like that. And that kind of leads me into this last statement here: have a plan and a backup plan. So you kind of always have an idea what you hope will happen, what you want to happen, but you also need a sort of a backup plan if something were to go awry, whether it be, again, weather, or if someone can't finish the trip, maybe have an exit strategy for that person. And again, it's just, pre-planning, good customer service kind of stuff. So this is a list of resources. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but you'll see Chosen Valley Creating Ability is in there. That's their website. And when you're looking at the docs, the last doc, it's the last bulleted point. The Easy Doc is really the best one, but of course it's the most expensive. But it's some really great resources there for you. And then just so you're not overwhelmed, it's not always necessary to purchase the costly equipment, and you can use a junk drawer approach. And that term, I think, came from Patty Cleveland as well in our first training. And so, you want to think about things that you might have in your drawer, such as, pieces of foam blocks or foam cylinders, some duct tape, some zip ties, an old bicycle tube, a bandana, any of that kind of stuff that you can sort of help and make an adaptation for a person. And again, ask them, that person with that disability, each person, even if they had the same disability, they might, be able to do things differently. So talk to them, and then if you work together, you can sort of succeed together. So if you think about it, we as the program leaders are sort of the expert on our organization and our programs, whereas our participants are the experts on their ability levels. So ask them what's worked in the past for them. Admit it if you don't know about their disability, and ask questions to better understand that disability. And then when you're going to adapt equipment, you want to use as much standard equipment as possible and use the least amount of adaptations as possible, and then get their feedback on which adaptations are helpful and which are not. And one disclaimer here, you never want to strap someone into a kayak. If the kayak were to capsize and tip over, the person needs to fall out of that, so you don't want to hinder that from happening. And then also, if a person has a prosthetic, this can cause an entrapment danger in a kayak or canoe. So you'll want to have them remove that and either store it in a dry area in the kayak if there's room, or store it somewhere on shore where it's secure. So these are just some sort of tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. And don't ever hesitate to ask for help from a local organization or an expert that is doing something similar to what you want to be doing. and we all sort of learn and grow that way.
Thank you so much, Emily. I'm going to just put very quickly before Larry gets started here, I'm just going to put this list of resources for adaptive equipment back up on the screen, so if anybody wants to take any more information from that, they can. In the meantime, Larry Joya is our last presenter, and he's going to talk about his experience and where he's come from and what he's done as well. So I welcome Larry.
Great. Thanks, Samantha. Appreciate it, and welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. So what I want to do is build off of what Patty and Emily have talked about relative to their programs. We heard about the importance of universal design and person first. It's a great foundation, and Emily gave you some information about paddling and the great things she's doing with the state parks. I want to kind of build off of that, talk about some of the things we're doing here in Pittsburgh and some of the lessons learned relative to the importance of networking and not going at this alone. And so to do that, I'd like to share with you kind of my own personal journey relative to kind of getting involved with adaptive because it's a bit different in so much as I don't come with a background in recreational therapy. I actually, in full disclosure, about 2.5 years ago, I couldn't count on one hand the people I knew with a disability. I'm very excited to tell you that I probably couldn't count on all the hands we have here virtually today, the people that I know and involved with and have since befriended. So I'm very excited about that. And I kind of refer to it as my journey from ignorant to advocate. And so I'll start with this young man you see here on the screen. This is Evan. I got to know Evan about 2.5 years ago. As you can see, Evan's paddling a kayak. He's an adorable kid. I met Evan in Chicago, so I too am a paddler by way of background. I've been paddling for about 10 years. I was doing some instruction at the Chicago Boat Show. Paddling with a bunch of kids. It was a beautiful day on the water and inside, a lot of kids having a good time. Evan was a little bit different. And if you look at this picture, Evan is paddling with one arm. Evan was born as a congenital amputee, so he has a limb difference. And he has no prosthetic. So he's paddling this kayak on his very own and doing what he needs to do to adapt. And so why do I share this with you? So I share this with you because it actually opened my eyes as a complete outsider, knowing nothing about disability, knowing nothing about those with limb differences or otherwise. And I really started to think about, so I would love to get involved personally and help people with disabilities and get into the water. And so actually Emily Borks was one of the people that I actually got to reach out to, learned about her program, learned about some of the great things that are going on here in our region, and realized there was actually not a gap, but there was an opportunity here to offer some more private instruction. And so Dynamic Paddlers is an organization that I started about 2 years ago, which is a paddling school for youth and adults of all abilities. Similar to Emily, we partner together in different capacities in delivering programs. That's not what this is about, though. It's not about Dynamic Paddlers. It's about this broader network. And so I only share this with you in so much as a part of creating that experience and identifying new people in the community. I took a step back and said, and I'm sure like many of you on this call, and that maybe some of you are further along than others, but I can tell you where I came from as I knew nothing about this. And as I started to reach out into the organizations and the various communities that we have, here in southwestern Pennsylvania, there's a lot going on with higher education and research and development and other providers like those on the call and those you've just heard from, health services, competitive sports. It was just this world of adaptive sports and related organizations. And it looked like this, and it still looks like this today. And maybe hopefully this should be of no surprise to you, but it's very siloed. A lot of amazing organizations who are doing great things with adaptive sports and recreation. And so what I've found, and through the creation of my organization and establishing Dynamic Paddlers, reaching out to folks like Get Outdoors PA, reaching out to folks like Emily, there was nobody really connecting the dots, right? So there was very little, if any, resource sharing. And so no central means to really share that information. And I had this hypothesis that there had to be a better way to do that. And so what we did, so I said, what if there was a better way to do this? And this idea of the Pittsburgh Adaptive Sports Network, the PASN, was kind of an idea. I'll tell you kind of how the idea has come to fruition over the past 1.5 years. And so the idea is, what if we could provide some structure? What if we could provide a means to kind of connect the dots amongst all those otherwise seemingly smaller organizations or larger organizations, nonprofits, for-profits, higher education, so on and so forth? And that was what we did. And so what did we do? So we, some colleagues and I said, hey, what if we invite everybody we know? And Emily was there as well, which was fantastic to kind of invite everybody in the community, at least here in southwestern Pennsylvania. And so let's see who shows up to have a networking event. And we called it the Meeting of the Minds. And we were very surprised by what we saw. We invited everybody we knew, and we said, hey, if 10 people show up, fantastic. If 20 people show up, even better. Much to our surprise, the people came, and they kept coming, and they kept showing up for all of about 130 people over the course of about 3 hours. And it was during that time that it really allowed the magic to happen. And that magic was nothing more than just providing a venue to get people to talk to each other, to realize there's so much going on in our community and share information. And that really became the catalyst to say, hey, we're actually onto something here as a community, recognizing that there's so much happening around us. And it's not just about passing. So I share this with you in so much as, yes, there's some lessons to be learned here, but think about this in the context of where you are, either within the state, obviously in the state of Pennsylvania or otherwise. I can guarantee you, and you're going to maybe be surprised or maybe not, here in a few slides I'll show you kind of some of the organizations that are out there. They're out there. You just have to pick up the phone and call them and reach out, let them know who you are, let them know what you want to do. And that's just what we did. And so what is the Pittsburgh Adaptive Sports Network? I think hopefully it becomes pretty clear. Our mission is pretty simple, right, is intended to connect the dots, not just between those existing organizations, but person like myself who was brand new to this world and just wanted to get some information. So that's connecting the dots between the new organizations, the existing people organizations to really enrich the adaptive sports and recreation community. I'm very excited to share that we actually have, as a part of the Pittsburgh Adaptive Sports Network, there's about 60 organizations, 60-plus organizations here in our region, in Pittsburgh proper, that are doing something relative to this. And I can guarantee you that's probably half of what's actually happening. So we're learning of new ones every day. That's what our mission is really all about. And it goes without saying, in anything that we do, whether any kind of community organization, we can really have a greater impact together, right? So it's about building this community and really helping everybody succeed and sharing resources and so on and so forth. So that's what we're all about. So what do we do? And so we're not intended to be a governance body. We're not intended to be an overarching organization, more so than we are to provide some resources. And so as you think about what you can do in your community, find out if there's a passing equivalent in your part of the state. And if there's not, I'd be happy to follow up with you offline after this to help you connect those dots. And so what we're doing here in Pittsburgh, so I mentioned this directory. So we have a formal directory of over 60-plus organizations. We are in the process of making that accessible online. So it becomes kind of that central resource to connect service providers, with athletes and families, with other service providers, and build a community. So we have this directory. We have a distribution list of over 300 people of all abilities who want to share resources and share calendar information and share events. That's something that's working very well for us. We leverage social media pretty heavily. So on Facebook, you can find us on Facebook at the Pittsburgh Adaptive Sports Network. You'll see some information here in a second. So we use social media as a means to share information and get people out there and making people aware of what's available. And also, as of late, and Emily and I were actually together teaching an adaptive kayaking course together just a few weeks ago, setting up and helping organize and rally the community around adaptive sports and recreation events. Having demos and meetups here in our region has been very popular and a great way to kind of bring people together. So what's coming next? You can expect to see a website that's actually searchable by activity and obviously exposing that directory to all of you. The idea here is not just to keep this Pittsburgh, right? So this is a model that we feel can be emulated elsewhere. So I'm very happy to share the information with you of how we did it in more detail offline. But it's about, going forward, there's a newsletter, and also as we kind of formalize ourselves as a 501c3, we are going to stand up what we call the Pittsburgh Adaptive Sports Network Foundation, which is to provide monetary resources to not just the organizations, but individuals here in our region to help defray some of the costs relative to some of these sports and recreation. So with that, in the time that we have left, I would like to share with you some just best practices, and hopefully you've heard some of these already. What have we learned? And obviously I think my colleagues here on the phone would share similar sentiments in so much as get involved, right? Whether you're just starting out in this world of disability, or maybe you already have a program, just immerse yourself. I think the best way that you can learn is to either volunteer and just be there, be a presence, and be a sponge, I think is the biggest thing I personally take away, is just to learn. I think it was very well said early on, is that you are the expert either in your sport or in your programming. The person with a disability is the expert in their disability, so they're going to may know more about that, and so you use that as a teaming approach to how to best adapt and improvise. So immerse yourself in the community. The second thing is, hopefully it goes without saying, is do not try to start from scratch. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and consider all about some of the phone resources for all of you to help connect the dots in the community. It's really, really important that you're not trying to reinvent the wheel because there's a lot going on in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Ask lots of questions. Obviously, there's no silly questions. I ask plenty of my own along the way, and that goes for asking questions, the resources that you heard about today, but also of those you're working with, right? So you should absolutely feel free to ask questions if you don't know something. That's really, really important. And then finally, this is a personal mantra of mine, and I'm happy to share it with you, which is ABCD. Always be connecting the dots. It goes whether that's a part of your adaptive sports and recreation efforts or otherwise. It goes a long way to really start connecting the dots. We have so much going on here in the Commonwealth that's really, really important. So with that, let me just at least share with you. I know this is going to be a quick slide, and we'll share this with you. It sounds like Samantha will send you all this information afterwards. Here's a small sampling of some of the resources that you have available to you across the state of Pennsylvania. So we've got in all four corners, there's something going on. This is, again, it's a small sampling of some of the things and resources that you can reach out to. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them here on this call or afterwards we'll provide our information. But for those who do want to reach me personally or find us on Facebook and Twitter, feel free to reach out on there. And I will be online, obviously, for the course of the next 15 minutes or so, but I'm going to pass it to Samantha to kind of put a bookend on this and tell us about kind of how we can all be in touch. So thanks.
Thanks, Larry. I just posted for all of you the link to the AmericanCanoe.org website where you can get information about the adaptive kayaking workshop that Larry is putting on. I know he commented that registration is almost full, but I just wanted to give you that information. So I'm going to paraphrase for you or give you a couple of highlights or comments that Bill Metzger talked about this morning when we talked to him. He's an individual who was an avid bicyclist and then became a hand cycler, and then about 5 years ago he lost use of his legs and is in a wheelchair. And some of the things that he talked about that were important to him was a lot more physical accommodation in terms of accessible restrooms. He commented about bodies of water. He has no interest at age 62 in getting in a kayak in whitewater, but he commented about the numbers of lakes and flat water bodies of water and the fact that so many of them are not really accessible for someone like him. So that was kind of an issue that he brought up, as well as trails, that he really likes paved or hard surface trails, that really makes it much more comfortable for him in terms of accessibility. And he's worked out in the western part of the state on a couple of different trail systems. So that's where his experience has been. In terms of feeling comfortable, his concern or his desire is that the people who are instructing know what they're doing. He would like to do kayaking, and when asked what was important, he said they know what the hell they're doing. That's the most important thing. He doesn't really care if the program is just for people without legs or if it's for the overall total population. That isn't important to him. So that was something that was was helpful, as well as the question, did he care about whether it was an adaptive type of scenario or whether it was, where the equipment was, was built to be adapted, or more like what Emily Boards has provided at the state parks, or whether it was more of the, put it together and accommodate your users. So we thought that was really important. What I'm going to show you now is just some samples. This is an adult inclusion questionnaire that Parks and Department for Bloomington, Indiana uses. That's the front and the back, and those PDFs are available for both the adult and the child adaptive questionnaire. They are on the website in the partner portal, so you can look for them there. We also have a link here, also available through the partner portal, the Universal Access Trails and Shared Use Paths document that PALTA, Pennsylvania Land Trust Association, just completed. And Pennsylvania Land Trust Association is one of the flagship partners for Get Outdoors PA. So we want to make sure that we promote their documents and things. So if you want direct links or more information on any of these documents, please chat them to us and we'll send them to you in an email if you're not a current partner and you don't have a login password to get into the partner portal, which is where we keep our resources. So in conclusion, I hope that you got some information here that was helpful. This is where we kind of open it up for questions. So we haven't had any questions as of yet. So I don't know if that means that we answered everything, but this is an opportunity for you to ask questions of any of our presenters. I also will talk a little bit more about Get Outdoors PA. If you are not a partner, you want to learn more, you can go to getoutdoorspa.org, and we have information on there about what it means to be a community partner, how to become a community partner. That's something that you can do online with an online application. Let's see. Sue Stackhouse just wrote that she's looking for resources for adaptive skiing. Can anybody help with that? Does anybody know of anything specifically? I see that this picture here at the end was from Disabled Sports USA. Yep. Disabled Sports USA is a great resource, and they are nationwide, but they do have connections locally. So Larry, it looks like you have some response.
Yeah, sure. So, and Sue, if you can maybe chat in back to chat and where you are in the state. So I'll just build off of that. So Disabled Sports USA has a directory on their site. We'll actually put a link out in the chat window. They have chapters all over the United States. Locally here within the Pittsburgh region, you have Three Rivers Adaptive Sports. Out in central Pennsylvania, you have Two Top Adventures, which offers adaptive skiing programs, public programs, and then some private instruction. And so we can absolutely send that information to you after this call with some more resources for adaptive skiing.
I hope that answers your question, Sue. Disabled Sports USA has a lot of great information on it. I went on it after talking with him and checking it out, and they have connections for a lot of different, not only outdoor recreation, but any kind of sports. I mean, they have a lot of, they have basketball and some of those more active traditional sports. That's a good resource.
Samantha, they also have what's called sitski.org, sitski.com, which is it's kind of an organization, but there's also a adaptive ski.org organization where people can go for resources. Many of the major ski resorts as well, like Stowe and Vail Resorts, they have folks on site who will help people who are traveling and are interested in trying that. But really the best place to start is Disabled Sports USA.
Okay. I just found Adaptive Ski.
AdaptiveSki.org, and then the other one is sitski.com.
Okay. Sitski.com. Oh, there it is. Okay, we'll put both of those on the chat box so you can see. And we'll broadcast that to all. Okay, any other questions? If you would let us know either through the survey at the end of this call or by chatting it to us, whether or not you want more specific information, more detail on particularly Patty's presentation on the customer service. She does entire training programs for that. That's a day long or 2 days long, that kind of thing. So it would be helpful for us to know if you want more details about any of this, either directly through her, which her contact information is on the screen in front of you, or you can contact us as well. Again,
right, and we can really tailor that to what your needs are, how advanced staff may be, how advanced programs may be, or maybe you're just getting started out and you need to convince that person who's been working in your agency forever that this is a viable and important demographic and potential population and potential customer. We can really go the full gamut.
Okay.
And do more in-depth programming on modification and adaptation.
Yeah, this was really just intended to give you a taste of consideration, because there are some organizations who have not had the opportunity to kind of dig into that yet. So if you are not a community partner, please visit getoutdoorspa.org and consider applying to become a community partner. Also, if you look at the last slide here in the upper right-hand corner of your page, there is a little letter envelope icon, and that is a place for the public to sign up to receive our e-update, which is probably going to be monthly, and that's called Get Outdoors Pathfinder. So currently partner news gets sent out to all of our Get Outdoors PA partners, but the Pathfinder is for the public, and that has slightly different information that we think the public may be interested in. So if there aren't any more questions, you can visit our website again, or you can email us at info@getoutdoorspa.org. And just a little plug, we are going to be doing the Go Days in honor of the National Get Outdoors Day in June. And at the end of May, we will be offering another webinar, and that one is on using social media. So that was very popular in terms of interest level from our community partners when we polled all of you in the beginning. And Emily did post on there the website information if you're not a community partner currently. So I think that's all it. Thank you so much. Please get in contact with one of us if you have more questions. And if not, thanks again for supporting Get Outdoors PA, and have a great afternoon.